in perfect.
Good stuff. Okay, yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, it was a nice introduction that from Johnny, but it's a pleasure to be here, really. An Englishman working for a Welsh club presenting at the Irish Tableau user group. But this is tactics training in Tableau. It's something that I've spoken about before on a football specific user group, but hopefully this would be new to a lot of the people watching today. So we'll dive straight in, he says, as it doesn't work. There we go. So we'll start with why. So why are we using Tableau and why are we using data in sport, and obviously predominantly football for myself? Is to win football matches. Ultimately, as an analyst, that's our end goal. Everything we do, every little piece of information that we can give to the coaches and to the players is to win football matches. So we'll dive straight in. About me, I won't speak about this for too long. There's plenty more exciting things to look at than this. Studied sports science at Liverpool John Moores, finished in 2014. From there, I went to work for Prozone, who are now called Stats Perform, who are one of the main data providers with regards to football data. That was both in the US and in England as well. I then went to work for a company called Rewards for Racing, which is probably an unusual one really to throw in here compared to all the sort of football clubs as well that follow that. But Rewards for Racing was actually the company where I first started to use Tableau, so that was a really important role for me. Following on from that, I've worked for Forest Green Rovers, Derby County, and now Swansea. And yeah, as I mentioned there, sort of my last 4 roles, starting with Rewards for Racing and then taking that knowledge to the 3 football clubs. I've used Tableau now, the last 4 roles. Those have been as an insight analyst, a data analyst, and a technical analyst. I think really the technical analyst is probably what best describes me. Not massively from a data background, it's just what I've learned as sort of my career has progressed really. And it's about turning sort of big data into manageable insights for the coaching staff and for the players as well. So just talk about what we do at Swansea now. There's going to be a lot of examples of how we use Tableau. But our sort of analysis philosophy is based on these 3 Ps. So having the right people, the right products, and the right processes. So if we dive into people, that's the team there that we're working with at Swansea. So we've got Steve Rands, he's our head of analysis. Tom Jenkinson, tactical analyst. Myself, technical analyst. And Dan Morris, who's our data architect, who's really big help for me. We've then got Johnny and Hannah, who work in the academy as well, who we try and help as much as we can using Tableau. And then just to the right-hand side there, we've got David Tivy and Dan Nisbet, who are our 2 physical performance coaches. And we have a big crossover with them. We're in the same office as them. And they use Tableau really heavily as well. And then the 3 people as well, you can sort of see grayed out slightly there, myself and the 2 Dans. So all 3 of us are using Tableau on a daily basis. Now, when I came into the club at the start of this season, nobody was using Tableau. And now we've got 3 using it on a daily basis, so which is really good. And the coaches are seeing it on a daily basis and the players are as well. So products, some of you might be familiar with some of these names here and some of you might not be, but these are really the key products that we use at Swansea. So our primary technical data source is Opta, which is now Stats Perform, but it's the same company. We'll essentially get around 2,000 to 2,500 rows of data per match. So if you imagine every time a ball is touched, you'll get a row of data. Catapult is then our primary physical data source. So the GPS units that the players wear in the back of their shirts, that obviously gives us physical data. So number of sprints, sprint intensity, distance covered, and so on. On the middle row there, we've then got Huddle, Sports Code, and SBG. These are the products that we sort of manipulate the data and the video within those products. And then finally at the bottom, Ross is a company called Piero, which is essentially where we draw telestration on top of video clips. So if you imagine when you watch Monday Night Football or Match of the Day, and you see sort of Gary Neville drawing circles and different things on the pitch, that's what Piero allows us to do. So every clip that our players see will always be telestrated. They'll never see a clip without it. And then of course, Tableau. All of our data goes into Tableau and everything that gets presented to the coaches and the players will be in there. So best-in-class products essentially allows us to deliver a world-class service. And then these are the processes. So I'm sure this is similar for Vinny and for most analysts out there. So first things first is we create a game plan. So we'll look at our opponent. So we're playing Reading tonight. So over the last few days, we've been watching Reading, looking at the video, also looking at the data. So qualitative and quantitative analysis, really. And we'll try and create a game plan. We'll then use these tools. So the tools I've just mentioned, along with iWorks Author, to create a book, which basically will have all the information on for the team we're about to play. That will then get delivered to the coaches. The coaches then go out onto the grass with the players, and the game plan that we've come up with, they'll then go and basically execute on the pitch with the players. And then ultimately, we end up on a match day where the players have to go and play the way we've trained, execute the game plan themselves, and hopefully we get a result. And then, of course, before that cycle starts again, which over the last month has been every 2 or 3 days, we'll always make sure we have enough time to review and analyse that game as well. Okay, so it's the process as the final P of the 3 Ps that we just spoke about there that I'm going to go through in quite a bit of depth here, and how Tableau helps us at Swansea. So this really is like a lot of real life examples. You're going to see a lot of Tableau worksheets and dashboards here. A lot of it's using dummy data, but it should give you a really good idea of how Tableau helps us. So pre-match, it's predominantly opposition reporting, right? So we're looking at the team we're about to play and trying to work out how we can beat them. So first things first is a player demographics dashboard. Now, this is really simple. You can see in the top right corner, there's a filter there. So you select the team you're about to play. Here we're looking at ourselves, we're looking at Swansea. And it's just giving you really basic information about their squad. So which players play the most games, play the most minutes, which players get subbed on and off more frequently than others. And we can also see the age of the player, the shirt number of the player, and the height of the player. Really basic information, but actually really important for all analysts to know heights of players and what number they're wearing. For set pieces and other things as well. Formation analysis. So this is a big one. So we need to understand what formations our opponent has played themselves, and also what formations they've faced. So by doing this, we can answer sort of some of these questions here. So what players are likely to feature in certain formations? What time are they likely to make substitutes, and which players are likely to come on and to come off at those times? And what formation have they struggled against? So if you see there in the bottom left of the screen now, we plot a formation using custom XY coordinates for every match across Europe. That automatically gets done now in Tableau. But a really nice case study here is how this has helped us win a huge game. So last season, Leeds United against Derby County. Obviously, I was working for Derby County at this point. It's the playoff semi-final, second leg. A little bit of context here. So Leeds had beaten us twice in the league, and they also beat us in the first leg of the playoffs. And there's a piece of history really there where nobody had ever won a playoff semi-final when they'd lost the first game at home. So we'd lost the first game at home. We had to create history to try and turn the game around. Using some of the things I've just spoken about, we knew we had to change because Leeds had beaten us 3 times. So we started to have a look in the data and try and work out if there's anything we could try and exploit them. Now, this is dummy data, but at the time, what we did was we looked at this second sort of lollipop chart here, the formations faced, and we noticed that Leeds had never faced a 4-1-2-1-2, which is essentially a diamond formation. You can see it just at the second bottom one up here. We noticed that Leeds had never faced that. We then went on to sort of transfer market and who scored, and we Googled Bielsa, obviously Leeds manager, gone through all his previous games, and we noticed that in sort of the years that we looked at, he hadn't faced a diamond. So we thought, okay, well, maybe that's something that we can utilise. We can then go to a worksheet like this, really straightforward. You know, anybody can make this in Tableau, really. But what it allows us to do, if I just play it through, is if you select the formation in the top right on the filter there, you'll see every team that's played that formation over the season and how many times they've played it. So again, here, this is a dummy run. But what I would have done last season was I would have clicked on the 4-1-2-1-2 formation, the diamond, and we could see which teams had played that. I think at the time, the 2 teams that had played that quite a lot last season were Tottenham and Manchester United. What we've then done from there is we've gone and found those games, the Manchester United and the Tottenham games, and we've watched how they've executed and how they've played in a diamond to use it for some best practice clips. So from finding the insights in Tableau to using our products SBG and Sportscode to clip up the video and to watch the relevant games of Manchester United and Tottenham, learning how they play a diamond effectively, we went to Leeds and we beat them 4-2, created a little bit of history, and we went to Wembley. So that's a real life example there of how Tableau made a huge impact for a big game. Playing styles as well. So pre-match, we can understand how teams play. Again, another little video here I'll play through. This was our last game before lockdown. We played West Brom. And when we'd watched the video, it felt like they were starting to go direct a lot more, so that rather than passing their own half, it felt like they were just putting the ball into the opposition half a lot quicker. Using a table like this, we can basically understand if our eyes match the data. So what we're looking at here is the 3 different bars. On the left, it's percentage of time spent in the defensive third. In the middle, it's percentage of time spent in the middle third. And then on the right, it's percentage of time spent in the attacking third. So if we look on the left-hand side, the time they've spent in the defensive third, you can see that in sort of 8 of the last 10 matches, they're below their average time spent in that third. So basically the data has married up to what we've seen with the eyes, and they're definitely getting out of that zone a lot quicker than they were previously. Another example here is where it doesn't need to be like an all singing, all dancing dashboard or worksheet. You know, sometimes you don't need radars and things like this. It can just be a bunch of tables. I play this one through, something that I showed in one of the football user groups I presented at. We've got a date filter at the top, so you can choose what dates you want to look between. There's then filters down the right-hand side for what league you're looking at. Do you want to look at the team for or against? Do you want to look when they're home or away? I think it just run through those options now. And what we can do here is we can go on the highlight and just type in a team. So here I've typed in Burton Albion. Did that purely because I'm from Burton, so I thought it would be an interesting one to look at. And what we can understand here now is how they pass the ball. So all 8 of these tables are distribution metrics of how they pass. Now, if we look at total passes and successful passes, they're sort of middle of the road. But when we then start to look at forward passes, passes into the attacking third, and passes into the penalty area, Burton ranked really high. Well, actually top for the last 2 metrics there. Now, that's interesting because what you might expect is a team that plays the ball into those areas might actually start to play a lot of long balls or a lot of crosses. You know, they're just trying to get it into the penalty area as quickly and as often as they can. But if we then look at sort of the 6th and the 7th table here at the crosses and the long balls, they're actually not that high for that. So what this would suggest, just from 8 basic tables, is that Burton, get it in your half quickly and play sort of good football to move it into your penalty area and to move it into the attacking third. So they're pretty good at getting the ball into dangerous areas. The next step from here, again, really straightforward stuff this. I think is my name just covering up that there, might be. We can then look at player level. So we're going to play Burton Albion. We can see that Lucas Akins and Scott Fraser, who's just up there, they're the 2 primary sort of creative players for Burton Albion. So we found the insight using the data and using Tableau, and now we can go and back it up in the video. So if I'm going to go and look at Lucas Akins' clips, I'm going to be looking for his passes into the penalty area because I know that that's one of his strong areas. And then a chance analysis dashboard as well. So this allows us to sort of discover where a team shoot from, where a team score from, when do they score goals as well. So a couple of nice, interesting pieces on here. Obviously, you've got 3 pitch maps along the bottom. On the left, we can see where all of the goals are from. In the middle, we can actually see in the actual goal itself, sort of a YZ coordinate of where their shots end up. And then on the right, we can see every shot they've had this season. That's sized by expected goals as well. So the more likely a shot is to result in a goal, the bigger the circle will be on that map there. A really nice one on here as well is the time of goal on the left-hand side. So we've split the game into 15-minute intervals, and we can start to understand where teams are strong or potentially weak for scoring and for conceding goals. So we're looking at Charlton here on the filter. They've actually scored 10 goals, which is the most of any 15-minute period between 75 and 90. So they're really playing to the final whistle. There's something to be aware of. It might be that we find a team that their goals against have been early, and it might be a tactic to try and get at them early. Now, in our first game back after lockdown a few weeks ago, we played Middlesbrough, and we knew that Middlesbrough conceded the most goals in the Championship in the first 30 minutes. So we made part of our game plan was to attack them early, get at them early. We were actually 3-0 ahead at half time, and the game was won, really. So Tableau is also affecting behaviours for sports science and for medical as well. So these are some of our physical performance sort of GPS dashboards as well, which I work closely with Dan Nisbet to create. A lot of this is dummy data, but this is showing us how did training compare to a match day. So every number on here is a percentage. So if you imagine on the left, it's sort of total distance, the orange is high intensity distance, the red is sprint distance, and so on. What percentage did this training session relate to an actual match day? So we can see that the top player there, 25% sprint distance compared to a match day in this particular training session. Something for the physical performance coaches to keep their eye on. The next step is then the acute chronic ratio chart as well. So this is load management. So green, amber and red here. Once a player starts to go into that red zone, it means they've probably been worked a little bit too hard, or we just need to come off them in training. So again, really useful tool, which updates automatically now in Tableau, which can make sure that we keep all of our players fit. And then finally, we've got weekly and daily training reports. So we can see by week and by day, total distance, high intensity distance. We can look at this at player level, or we can look at this at team level. So some really interesting stuff there as well. And I know the players like to look at this themselves as well. They'll often come over on the iPads and ask questions and want to know what they've done on a match day. So it's really good to have the players involved. Now, the next obviously part of analysis is live on a match day. So tracking KPIs during match days. Now, this is very much a work in progress. So what we want to be able to do is be able to track specific game plan metrics during a game. So we might say to the players in a pre-match meeting, we want to stick the ball in behind, or we want to get a 1v1 versus a centre-back in a wide area. We want to be able to sort of track these during a game. Tracking data would be a massive help. We don't have that at the minute in the Championship. The Premier League have a league-wide deal. Unfortunately, we haven't got it in the Championship yet, but maybe we'll be in the Premier League next year. That'll give us a whole wealth more data to play around with. And then live physical data as well. So from the GPS units, if we can start to ingest that data live, we can potentially be able to impact when substitutes are made, when players are starting to drop off their physical levels as well. So home and away, we have a really strong setup, whether we're at home on the left or whether we're away, you can see the max and everything set up. So we have Tableau open amongst our other programs, and we can create really simple things like this. So really basic metrics we can just track throughout the game. If anything there flags up, we can radio down to the bench and let them know. The manager will see this at half time as well when he goes into his office. And then we move to post-match. So measuring performance against our philosophy and the game plan as well for that specific game. So we have traffic light reporting, where it's green, amber, red, depending on how we compare to our season average. So there's a lot of data on there. You're probably not going to be able to read it all right now, but these are really important metrics for us to measure. So in this game, there's a lot of green on there, which is good. Simple benchmarking as well. So key metrics for passing at the top and for attacking metrics as well at the bottom there. We're just tracking them over time. So if you look on the attacking benchmarking chart there on the very right-hand side, red means we've lost that game. And as you can see, our shots from the danger zone and our expected goals were way below average. So that's one of the reasons perhaps that we lost that game. And then again, benchmarking. Again, quite difficult to read really, this one. But once you start to understand it and you know what you're looking at, this gives us real insight as to how we've progressed over a season. KPIs. So did we execute our game plan? So within an hour really of a game finishing, all of this stuff that we're about to go through will be available for the coaches and for the players as well, should they want to see it. So again, similar to what we've seen live, we'll get basic metrics here. Now, obviously this is a little bit more in depth to what you could find on, let's say, Sky or BBC. If you look at the bottom there, we have successful passes into the link zone. That's a custom zone that only we use. There won't be another team that will use that. That's bespokely measured using XY coordinates for us. We'll also have like a sort of a dynamic passing grid. So on the left here, you can see which players pass to which other players. When you then click on that, on the matrix, you can actually see it play out on the pitch to the right as well. So in this particular game was when Swansea played Cardiff this season. This particular pass here from our goalkeeper to Wayne Routledge was something that we'd worked on. We'd shown a lot of videos that this is where we could hurt Cardiff. So it was really good at the end of the game to be able to just quickly load this up, look at those specific passes, and we actually managed to pull that off 4 times, which is quite a difficult pass really from the goalkeeper. So that's pleasing to see, and something really good for the coaches to see straight after the game. Simple shot charts again. These are just examples so we can see where we've shot from, where our opponents have shot from, and an expected goals timeline as well. So was there a period of the game where we run the cosh, or was there a period of the game where we started to dominate with regards to chances created? And then all coaches have access to this on their iPads, on the Macs, via Tableau Online. And then what we'll do as well is we'll build a written report where we'll screen grab Tableau. I know it's not ideal for the usability, but they do have that on their iPads. But then we'll also create like an iBook where you see this shot map and you'll be able to click on the shots and you'll see the video as well. Individual analysis. So every individual player get one of these as well. So they're match day KPIs, and we compare them to their season average as well. So how have you performed in this particular game compared to the rest of the season? Again, that thumbprint there, you'll press that and your clips will pop up for the players to watch. Different metrics, just pop back one there, sorry, I missed that. Different metrics are used for each position as per our player profiling model. So what essentially we've done is we've used all the Opta data and we've pulled out the most commonly coded events for each position. So if you imagine a fullback, a right back or a left back, they're going to be sort of making block crosses. They're going to be crossing it. They're maybe going to be dealing with 1v1 defending, potentially taking players on. We've then got all of those metrics and we've asked the coaches of these, rank them out of 10 as to what you think is the most important for each position. They've gone away and done that. This is in Excel, but I didn't make it. So don't hold this one against me. This was made before I got to the club. But essentially what this shows us is how highly we rank each metric, right? So I think this is probably looking at a centre-back here by looking at the headed clearances, the aerial duels won, passing the ball forward. These are the key metrics for a centre-back. So when we send out those individual reports, these will be the metrics that a centre-back will see. Obviously, a headed clearance, our striker doesn't need to see that. This takes us to case study 2, which is a bit of individual analysis, so individual development. So George Byers is one of our young players. We noticed that he's potentially not playing the ball forward as much as we'd like. So we have a meeting where we have one analyst and one coach would go into a room with George. It'd be quite an informal meeting, really. Just stand up, look at the big screen and talk about some of the things we've seen here. So I'll play it through just to give you an idea. So as a team, we play forward a lot. But then when we look at George specifically, every circle on here represents a player in Europe. The higher the rank you are, you're closer to the left, and the lower you are to the right. So if you look at the very top row here, successful forward passes, George actually ranks quite low, especially when we're a passing team and a team that likes to pass the ball forward. So we've shown this to George. We've now gone from Europe just to the Championship to see where he sits. And then we can ask him the question on here, looking at successful passes and receiving the ball in the attacking third. Where do you think you rank? George then obviously put his finger on the big screen and said, I think I'm here. And we then pull it up. And he's quite shocked, obviously, to think he's potentially that low. He thinks he's much higher up. What we can then do is highlight other players in his position in our league. And essentially the target is get to that level. What we can then do is we can start to track this over time. So 2 to 3 weeks after we've had this meeting with George, we can then go back and see how we've started to progress, and hopefully he's heading in the right direction. So that's an example there, a real use case of where Tableau was used in front of a player. And again, physical performance post-match. So we use the Catapult GPS data. We also use Huddle data, which is captured via cameras built into our stadium to analyse physical performance for both ourselves and for our opponents as well. So just a simple dashboard here. I think we're looking at total distance, so we can look at our team compared to the opposition team at team level or at a player level. And then here, this is a one that I know the players really like to look at. So imagine there's one player selected here on the filter. He can see on his last game, did he hit the average? Did he hit his maximum for total distance of a high intensity distance compared to the rest of the season? So that's a real, probably a quick overview really, but there's lots of examples there of where Tableau helps within our sort of weekly, daily processes at Swansea. And then finally, I'm just going to dive into set pieces. So these are obviously corners and free kicks. So marginal gain set pieces in the Championship are huge, really, really important. A lot of teams sort of stay up because of set pieces or even get promoted because of set pieces. There are 20 set pieces per game in the Championship. And last season, Swansea conceded 24 goals from set pieces, which from the data we have is the most in Europe, which is obviously not good. So this season, we knew we had to do some work on it. Now, what we're looking at here is set piece goals scored minus set piece goals conceded. So obviously, if you've scored 10 and you've conceded 5, you'll be plus 5 and vice versa. We can see here, some teams have done really well. They're plus 6. Other teams are minus 12. I'm not sure who that is. I'm sure the analysts of that team will know. But what's really interesting here is this snapshot was taken just before lockdown. But 7 of the 10 teams in blue, so 7 of the teams that have got a plus set piece goal difference, were really in the race for promotion. So it just goes to show you how important set piece goals are in the Championship. And then a little note there as well that, again, at the point of lockdown, we were 16 goals better off sort of in March this season to March last season. So we've made real improvements. And hopefully case study 3 gives us a bit of an example as to why. So we can now use Tableau to find weaknesses when we're looking at our opposition. So we're about to play Hull City. So where do they win first contact? So when you deliver a corner, where do they win the first ball? So if we look at this chart, if you see this area here around the near post, they're pretty strong at winning first contacts there. And then also around the penalty spot. So their setup is they're zonal across the 6-yard box and then they mark in the middle here as well. So we're trying to find an area where they're weak. And what we've noticed is this space here, the front of the box. So a passed ball into the box rather than one being delivered onto the heads of the zonal men. So can we exploit this space here? So if I just play this through, you can see the setup. You've got 4 men across the 6-yard box. We know they're strong at defending there. There's 2 players in the middle near the penalty spot marking our 2 players. But just keep your eye on number 26 here, Kyle Norton for us. There you go. So we found the weakness using the data. We've obviously let the coaches know. The coaches have then created a plan with the players on the training ground, and then the players have gone out and executed it on a match day as well. Again, real life example there of how Tableau has won points for us this season, or has helped to win points for us this season. So there's 3 case studies. And I was going to leave it there, but actually yesterday I got asked a question. So I thought I'd give you a little Brucey bonus as well, which wasn't going to be in here. So real life example in real time. This came through yesterday from a coach. This is a text. Can you find this stat for me? Goal score to the percentage of set plays. So essentially what the coach wanted to know was, for the number of corners that we face, how many goals do we concede percentage-wise? So this is literally live. This hasn't been sped up. This is exactly what I did yesterday. I'll play it through and you'll get an idea of just how quickly Tableau can give us these insights. So I'm on our set piece worksheet, or workbook, should I say. So I drag in the team there. Couple of filters. Again, you'll all be really familiar with all this sort of stuff. I want to look at this season. And then the type of set piece, obviously it could be a corner or a free kick. I wanted to look specifically at corners. And then I made a quick calculated field, which you don't actually see here. I think I'll just edit it so you can have a little look. It's basically just the number of goals by the number of corners. Really straightforward stuff. And we've pretty much got the answer there. I just format this now, turn it into a percentage and sort it. And now what we're looking at is what percentage of corners that we face or that we take, we can select whichever one we look at, for or against. How many do we concede or score? I think I just pull up the parameter now and I go against. So now what we're looking at is, of all the corners that we've had against us, what percentage of them do our opponents score a goal from? Okay, because we think we're pretty good defending corners, as we've just mentioned previously. And there we are. So 2.5%, 2.6% of the corners we face result in a goal. And as you can see sort of on the scroll there, that's pretty low down, much lower than it was last season. So we've answered that question there really, really simply in Tableau. But at the same time as doing that, I've also noticed something as well. So again, this is in real time. On 4, I found this team here, and excuse the pronunciation, I'm going to go for Wiesbaden. But I've noticed that of all the corners they have, they score 9.3% of them. Now that's really high. So I'm interested in this. I'm going to have a little look at what they do from corners. So I've answered the question the coaches give us, but I can go a little bit further now and give them some more information as well. So if I go to our main set piece dashboard, I select Wiesbaden on the team, and we can now get some insight as to what they do with regards to corners. So if you look at the heat map in the bottom right, it's really condensed. They're delivering everything into sort of the middle of the goal. Their first contacts won is 33%. I'll just whiz that back. I was going that quick, I can't even catch up with myself. There we go. The first contacts here, 33% of the corners they take, they win the first contact, so they win the first header. So 1 in 3, really, really high number. What I've then thought I'll do is, right, well, I'll have a look at the video and see what they do in the video as well, see if there's anything in there that we can take going forward. So I open up Y-Scout. This is basically a video platform. Search for Wiesbaden. Click on attacking corners on the left-hand side there. And within 30 seconds or a minute of discovering that they're a pretty good team at attacking set pieces, I can watch the clips. And as if by magic, the first one they have, they nearly score from as well. So again, real life example. This is literally from yesterday or the day before, where we've got a question from the coach. We've answered the coach's question really quickly using Tableau, and we've actually gone and given them some extra insight. So what I'll do there is I'll go and clip up some of those corners, and I can share it with the coach and say, these are really good at attacking corners. Maybe there's something in it that we can use going forward. So pretty much wrapping it up now. So as I mentioned at the start, turning big data into meaningful insights, that's essentially my job, and Tableau is a massive help for that. 3 reasons here why Tableau is so important for us. One of them is control. So we can decide who sees what. So our recruitment analysts, we're to see things that our sports scientists can't see, and vice versa. The simplicity. So I think everything I've shown here has been really simple stuff. Sometimes you don't need calculator fields and set actions. You can deliver a real clear message just using a table or a bar chart. Then also the flexibility as well. So sometimes to have the filters, to have the tooltips, and to have the actions can allow the user themselves to discover the insights rather than me or the other analysts having to sort of force it down the coach's throat. They can just go and find these insights themselves. And that's me. I hope you enjoyed it, everybody.
Absolutely fantastic, Tom. Really amazing. I love that bit with Kyle Norton. It was a beautiful piece of analysis, and you saw the results straight away. I think that last part was particularly spectacular. There's a few questions come in for you, and we'll get through them quickly enough, if that's okay with you, Tom, without rushing you. So an anonymous attendee has asked, have you linked Tableau and video to Huddle so you can click a data point for the video? Is this useful if you've done it?
We haven't. It would be nice to do. I believe there's some work. I actually was speaking to somebody at Tableau a couple of days ago about sort of embedding video within a Tableau workbook or dashboard. We haven't done that yet. That would be the next step. And if we get to that point, you know, it really takes us to another level. But at the minute,
game changer,
yeah.
Second question from Kieran Brown. Does every team have access to the same data, or do you have an edge if every, you know, all of these questions, by the way, you don't have to answer them if you don't want to, by the way, okay? It's a great question. If every team has access to the same data, do you also try and anticipate their analysis and associated tactics? Like, I mean, it's always the way. It's a game of cat and mouse, really. Like, I'm noticing with Arsenal lately, like Arteta has made massive changes, particularly at the back. And you can see that without going into the analysis. And but anyway, there's always that cat and mouse. But does every team have access to the same data, or do you have an edge?
They have the potential to have access to the same data. So our data is from Opta, who are now Stats Perform. You buy the league-wide deal. So we have data on every team in Europe. Every team in Europe has the same opportunity to have data on us.
It's the age-old thing. Sorry, Tom, for interrupting, but it's a question of using the data that you have to the best effect.
Exactly. Yeah. So you know, our department, we back ourselves to be the best. You know, that's why I don't mind sharing some of these things on here today. That's fine. Yeah, we trust in what we do, and we know what we're doing, really, with regards to looking at the opposition.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. And the final question here then from Tom Pilgrim, colleague of ours. Great talk, Tom. Thanks. Do you ever have issues? This was a question I was going to ask actually as well. Do you ever have issues with buy-in from coaches or players? So when putting together game plans, what you actually will say, do your managers and your players always agree with you? And actually, I wanted to sort of ask is, do you ever sit down with the coaches in terms of how to deliver the data to players as well?
So the coaches at Swansea are really good, to be fair. With regards to data, they're really interested. They like to see the insights. A lot of how our meetings will go, really, when the players are involved, is we'll sort of give them, we call it a grab 'em. So we'll post like a data slide at the start of, whether it be a post-match or a pre-match meeting. There'll be a grab 'em, which will be a slide with data on it. And then we'll go in and show them how the video basically backs up what we've just said with the data. When we have an opposition sort of game plan meeting as well. So let's say we play Reading tonight a few days ago, and the Reading meeting would go in and we'd be armed. We say, this is where Reading are strong, this is where they're not strong. And then again, we'd always back up with the video. So as long as the two marry up, you always get the buy-in, really.
Great. Okay, two more, and it's been a very popular presentation. So really, again, thanks a lot. Ida O'Keefe, how does player training data get processed, ingested? Is it the same tracking, GPS, etc., as in the game?
Yes. So as I mentioned, actual tracking data we don't have. That's when it's tracked by a camera in the stadium. Yeah. What we have is we have the GPS units in the back of the shirt, which the players will wear for every match and for every training session, which is from Catapult. Mm. That's essentially an Excel export, which we're trying to work on. Our data architects trying to get into the API for that, rather than having to keep basically copy and pasting Excel into Excel into Excel. But we've managed to create some really nice reports using that, to be fair, in Tableau. We also are one of the first clubs in the country that use Goodall physical data as well. So in a stadium, Goodall have got cameras installed. So it doesn't actually track everything and give you a full tracking data, but it does give you physical data. Yeah. So we know how far we've run in comparison to the opposition. We can also access that data from other stadiums as well. So, for example, again, we use the example of Reading tonight. We can look at Reading's last 3 games, whichever stadium they were playing in, and we know their physical data. So, again, that data is available for every team, but every team aren't using it like we are.
Okay, brilliant. And the last one then from Jonathan Fitzpatrick. How does the data that you work with in Tableau differ to the data that you use in Match Tracker?
Well, it's the same. It's Opta data, so it won't differ. Yeah.
Okay, well, in that case, we might have time just for one more. Michael says, very good presentation. Thanks. Is there much manipulation to be done with the raw data coming through, or are the visualizations you were showing straight from the data source? Good question.
Yeah, so there is some data manipulation. Dan Morris, our data architect, is really good for that. So he essentially takes it from the Stats Perform Opta API and stores it in a SQL database. I then pull it from the SQL database. Again, we can do a custom SQL when we pull it into Tableau for certain workbooks and for certain dashboards. So yeah, there is a little bit of manipulation in the background, and I'm not going to take the credit for that because Dan does a lot of really good work as well.
Brilliant stuff. Tom, honestly, that was a wonderful presentation, and I love the video additions as well. So really, thanks a lot. There's so many things coming in here. Martin Murphy, excellent presentation. Loads of things. You'll be able to see it all later on, and it was really fantastic. So listen, thank you very much. We're going to hand over to Vinny Hammond from the IRFU and Rob Carroll from the Information Lab Ireland. And just before we do, I'm going to just send you, if you're at home, folks, and you fancy taking a photo of yourself on Zoom or witnessing the presentation or something like that, and send it on to me, we'd love to see it. I know it's a bit of a weird request, but we like looking at the. No, we don't. Just to show that you're participating, and we just love to see it. So I'll put my email address in there for that. Also, a bit of a plug for ourselves, the Information Lab Ireland. We're organising this event, and just want to let you know that we're constantly posting things on LinkedIn. One of the things that we will be posting either later today or tomorrow is a recording of this event, which will be hosted on Tableau's YouTube channel, but we will post a link to it on our LinkedIn page. So I'm just going to put that into the chat there. And if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, we'd really appreciate the support. And also, we post blogs every week and short videos with Tableau tips from various different consultants and the like. All right, so that would be a great help. Tom, thank you very much again. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Vinny and Rob. And Rob, if you guys are, yeah, you're all good. There you are. Okay, fantastic. And I've already made an introduction. So guys, I'll hand it over to you, Rob, really, and all the best, and I'm really looking forward to this particular presentation from Vinny. Tom, thanks again.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Tom. That was great. As Johnny mentioned, he introduced you, Vinny, as a decent rugby player. I only knew you as a failed cricketer, so that's as good as going to get for an intro today. You are the head of analytics and innovation at the IRFU. Can you, I suppose, explain a little bit about what that is or what your job entails?
I think the job now is that, well, it changes every couple of months, really, because we've a team of 14 or so analysts, from kind of data scientists end of things right up to pure rugby analysts, and somewhere in the middle exists a whole department of people who are all pushing the same direction with different skill sets. So it's trying to just tie all of those things together would be the way I see my role at the moment, is trying to bring a lot of different aspects of both data science but also of rugby together to put a team on the pitch. And exactly like what Tom had said there, it's for us there's two outcomes that we're looking at, is winning games, which is Premier League football team or Championship football team, that's what it's about. But then the other side of us is developing players. So it's trying to tie into a bigger picture and being a cog in that wheel that works pretty well if we can get it right.
Cool. And would rugby be the same? Do you have the same type of access to data sources, or how does that work in terms of like the kind of data you get or collect?
Yeah, I think I was looking at the slide Tom put up there of the products that they use in Swansea, and to be honest, it's almost identical to ourselves, give or take one or two. We have access to data as we need. At the same time, the suppliers of rugby data would be quite limited in comparison to football data. It's a smaller market. There's obviously less companies involved in it. So Opta would be our primary source of data, and therefore we would have to spend a lot of time collecting our own. And obviously that has its own challenges because you don't have the same volume. You're not collecting the same level of data across the whole world as you can get from a third-party provider. So somewhere along that way you have to make a sacrifice between data quality and data volume.
And that's what your team of analysts would be doing kind of day to day, a lot of the collecting that stuff themselves.
Yeah, we've got John Buckley, who runs the data collection center, and that runs at the weekends of every game and age grade games now as well, in collecting the custom data that we would want to collect best kind of see how Irish players are performing relative to the way we want the game to be played or the way we see the game being played. So that's our own. That would be quite specific, and then putting it into a worldwide context, we would use the Opta data and plug in our own metrics into that, try to normalize them as best possible and make some comparisons. Again, that's a really, really tricky one, because what's considered a soak tackle in one language doesn't necessarily translate to the same in another. So
cool. Okay, we might jump in. I know you have some examples to show, and I thought it was funny. Tom started with exactly the same thing, and we hadn't synced up. He was like, "Ultimately, we have to win. That's the main aim we're after here." And I know that your first slide is along very similar lines.
Yeah, I think that's the grounding point for me is always, will it make us or give us a better chance of winning a game? And before we start anything, is that ultimately the only one that really matters for us is that slide of where we are. And that's the Six Nations, or that's the South Africa 2017 right up to the present day, and some of the highlighted games in between. For me, if it doesn't affect this graph, and if it doesn't affect the player development, then really you've a hard job to justify why it's in there in the first place. From this kind of thing that we will put together, and I think our journey with Tableau is probably at an earlier stage than some clubs, and maybe a later stage than others, but certainly looking at what we've done in the last 2 to 3 years has been to slowly go in from an ad hoc approach to use Tableau to visualize something in a quick manner, to now bringing everything into one dashboard across the board, and to get some consistency in both data and presentation of data, right down to fonts and colors and all of that kind of thing. So I think we're on that journey as opposed to being at a destination. And every time, and this period of time has given me a really good amount of thinking space to see where do we actually fit into that, and what we wanted to see, and the strategy behind everything that we collect has to have some kind of a meaning. And I just go into, we spoke about earlier, Rob, about the Six Nations and the Six Nations that we're in at the moment, and like the power of the visualization for me, and this is something that I'd be passionate about, because players, their attention spans can vary, and people say attention spans are low. I don't believe that. I think attention spans vary. Some guys can actually sit for 2 hours and play whatever it is and Call of Duty at a very high level, which takes a massive amount of attention. And people think, well, they've no attention span. It's just different. And I think we try and hit it as best we can to players or to coaches in that moment of, like Tom described it as a grab 'em or whatever that is. And that's it for us. So we look ahead at France now in coming into the Six Nations. And we're saying, okay, well, what we need to do, this was before the lockdown, the Italy game had been cancelled. We knew we needed 2 bonus point wins, a bonus point win against France, a bonus point win against Italy. And sometimes it's a little bit like convincing players based around what we have collected to actually say that the goal that we're chasing is perfectly achievable. We look at what France have conceded over the last couple of years. And obviously it's trending downwards, and they conceded less. The greens are wins and the reds are losses. But sometimes for a player that can be powerful to actually say, we're still in this. It is possible to put a high score on a team. To do it 2 weeks in a row against teams as good as France and Italy, yeah, okay, it's going to be difficult. But I think having that ability, just like that grab 'em moment to say, no, we're still in this, and this is something that we're well capable of. So, trying to filter out when France play at home, what's the difference between them at home, them and when they're playing away. But now that home advantage thing potentially is taken away. So you get that average going even higher, and that average points conceded going higher. So maybe in other sports, we've seen that the home advantage drifting, and maybe that will work to our advantage when it comes to the game against France and the game against Italy in the Six Nations, because we're still in it.
And I suppose that's a key point as well, like Tom made as well, is sometimes these appear really simple, but you have to take in, like it's spoken a lot about data literacy within organizations and things like that, but presumably you have to really consider the audience when you're presenting back. So keeping it as simple as possible. This could be hours and hours of analysis, but ultimately when you give it to a player, it's something very concise, very easy to digest.
Absolutely. And even like for me, I would have a number of people that I run a graph by before I go near giving it to a coach, or, you know, the guys I work with in the office. I would regularly ask for nearly reassurance to say, does this make sense? And if there's even a question of what does that mean, or what's the bit on the side, or what's that line, if it takes a question, I think we've probably missed it, and we go back and we get it again. I regularly give stuff to my dad and go, you know, like, does that make sense to you? And if he questions anything, then that's a red flag for me. He's not exactly, he's not Bill Gates, but he, you know, so that, but I take him as the area that I need to be able to make sure that we can hit. And then obviously running by a couple of players in a casual sense to say, does this make sense to you if this was on the screen? And then before you launch it to a group of 40 or 50, at least you've got some kind of validation in your own head that it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. And because I sometimes people see a lot of very nice, fancy stuff done in Tableau, and it can be a little bit intimidating. I know certainly when I was learning it, the same. But actually, in the real world, the aim here is to get a message across. So I think keeping it simple is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we might move on. I'm always fascinated to talk about the referee in rugby, and you have a couple of slides here that, you know, kind of drill into that, how you'd start analysing a referee and look at those kind of things.
Yeah, like this one's a bit different because I think you know, you can watch a lot of rugby presentations and they're quite similar. So I tried to put something together that was a little bit different. Hopefully, the idea of the referee and penalties conceded in a game. Again, the way this is set up is just very simple. The 50% line is, did we give away more penalties in the game than the opposition? And the question that I would constantly ask is that if we gave away 25 penalties in a game, that sounds horrendous, right? But if the opposition gave away, you know, 100, speaking in stupid terms, but it makes a whole lot more sense when you think of it like that, to look at this as a percentage of what was happening in a game. You know, you might think you've done really well to only concede 10 penalties in a game. The opposition conceded 2. You've come out the wrong side of the referee. So we put that line in the middle, and you can see the one anomaly in all of those games leading up to the World Cup was this Japan game where we lost, and we also lost the battle of the referee. And it sticks out for me as one where, you know, we've never been that far off that middle line, and it's something that we probably look back on and see that, you know, there was something then perhaps that we drifted away from what we were good at up until that point. And saying that, we can win the battle of the referee and we can lose the game, the New Zealand game as well. The coaching argument is always, what side of the referee do you want to be on, and do you want to play exceptionally disciplined rugby and not give away any penalties, or do you want to look at, say, other teams that live right on the edge, and perhaps maybe it's better to be closer to that line, and if not on the other side of it, because you're constantly putting the pressure. And that's why, again, the coaches that we have in the system, right through from age grade to the senior coaches, would never be driven by a simple okay, let's go on the right hand side of this, and we need to end up on the right hand side of this graph, because that just doesn't make rugby sense at times. And they put the rugby knowledge into that and say, well, actually for this game, I wouldn't mind if we were a little bit nastier.
And then you can obviously drill into individual referees and give them a kind of a once over.
I think a motorbike just drilled into a wall out the side of my house there, but sounds things. Yeah, I can, and we can. This one is okay. So Nick Berry is a referee that was down to do our game against France that was postponed. The challenge that we have with these referees now is to make something quite simple. And the way I would in my head is to tier it 3 ways. So I would give something to the coaches very simple at the start, like this graph on the left hand side, and say, okay, well, this probably doesn't happen at all in football, but if you see this was his average amount of penalties given at the tackle and ruck scenario at the Rugby World Cup, then he's gone and refereed in the Super Rugby season, and then now he's refereeing in the Super Rugby Australia season. You can see a significant enough jump there. This kind of thing is all kind of normalized, and you know, there's nothing that stands out too much there. But something like this now is a red flag for any coaching staff, that they say, okay, well, this guy is significantly different to what he was the last time we played him. The last time we played them, then I would always try and keep that fixture in the forefront of our coaches and players' minds. The last time we played with this referee, we had a red card, and we gave away quite a lot of penalties in the game. And we look back and say, okay, well, you know, from a foul play perspective, that was something that we were, you know, five foul play penalties in a game, which is colossal for us. And going into that, then trying to find out, and this is what coaches I think are spending a lot of their lockdown period doing, is understanding the game is beginning to change a little bit more like football, or sorry, a little bit less like football in terms of the referee's impact of the game and how they interpret the laws, particularly around the breakdown. And you can see for us now, we're kind of looking to say, okay, these are the games that this referee is reffing in Australia with what's considered to be new interpretations of laws. The impact of this versus, say, when he refereed us against Samoa, and where does that sit? And you can just see that we've got to be conscious now of there is a shift in interpretations, and sometimes just visualizing it like this is easy. I would sometimes take all of those off completely, just give that, and I would have that as maybe my starting point, without showing anything else, and then just keeping our last fixture against Samoa here, so that when we do look at, okay, with 5 foul play penalties, what were they for? And you can see the 3 high tackles, 1 late tackle, and a foul play. There's a red card in there as well. So that would be really how I would go about scoping a referee. And we've got Adam and John Buckley who work in the background on the referees in real detail because of the impact that they can have on a game and the impact, I guess, that they have on the shape of the game going forward.
Would the link here be the same as kind of Tom showed in terms of the video? So you can look at this data, you spot, you know, additional penalties, but do you go off then and start trawling through videos to try and pick out clips as examples or see what's really changed?
Yeah, I think if you go back and you see something like this, okay, there's a lot of foul play penalties in that game. You add some context too. You go, okay, well, how or what was happening at the time? And at the time in the Rugby World Cup, the high tackle, the shoulder charge, the contact to the head or face or neck area was so heavily policed. That was the focus for a lot of the Rugby World Cup. It drifts back into this the new Super Rugby Australia season, and I think the focus for that season and same with the Super Rugby in New Zealand is around the tackle, the entry to the ruck. And yeah, it's definitely something you go back and you look at and you say, well, is there clips to back this up? And I know Tom was speaking about embedding video into Tableau dashboards. The only kind of thing I've done in the past is embedded like a GIF file, which just runs through like that one scenario of, say, it might have been Bundy's high tackle. It's not perfect to do it that way, and it's not perfect to link a YouTube either. But maybe one of the developers is watching there, and he's like, "Yeah, we need a video player to sit in there."
Yeah, it's.
You
I know
that
it's
kind of thing, Rob. So you could probably call that.
Well, I've done it, but with
course,
a totally different thing. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I'll talk to Mr. Tableau and see what he can do on that.
Yeah, perfect.
Have you noticed a change in what the coaches take? Like, you're obviously there, you're at the IRFU in more than 10 years. Is there a big change now in terms of their openness? Not specific coaches, obviously, but just in general, coaches' openness to looking at these types of reports? Like, do you have much buy-in?
Yeah, I think the coaches, and this is my biggest, nearly my overriding philosophy is that we have to, as best we can, personalize the experience for coaches and players, because just the human aspect of sport just doesn't leave you with 50 people that think and learn and perform in the same way. So for some coaches, it might be a lot of detail and a lot of graphs. They like to, like there's one coach that actually likes to look at, box and whisker plots and stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is great. But then there's another coach that wouldn't want to see anything like that. And he might just get that bit on the left-hand side. And I think all the analysts, thankfully, that we have appreciate the fact that each guy is different and each coach is different. And how they learn and how they want their data is different. So the best thing we can do is consistently ask them, does that make sense to you? And if there's any question on it, then we go back to the drawing board and literally draw up a different plan or a different route. To expand on that, Rob, I think what we've done now is we've got to the stage where each of the analysts, I think we've 14 across the board, but that they're now licensed creators and on Tableau, and each going through a certification process, so that if we do need to pull something up quickly and ad hoc, and like rarely do we get a week goes by where somebody just says exactly like what Tom showed in that text message, can you pull up what's the stats on Italy kicking the ball in their own 22, and the ability to do that quickly is gold for us.
No, I totally agree. Like, obviously my background was in sports before this, for the information lab, and the same thing. It was not that you couldn't answer those questions, it was just that it would take a week.
Exactly.
And then by the time they had another question or a coach comes along, you're a month into something that was probably just a simple text message. So I think it's that power, for me, that power of just being able to combine all of your data into one place. And Tom showed a great example there of just how quickly he could answer something. That the rest of the teams, was a good question somebody asked, the teams have access to all the data, and kind of the short answer is, in theory, yes. In reality, how many of them are actually making use of it and putting in the process, like you guys and Tom are doing, is totally different.
Yeah, and I think the derived statistics that we can take from, I think one thing that I would have learned is that we've got all these numbers, but some of the numbers that we get, we still have to do a little bit of work to them to bring them into something that really matters, like, looking at certain metrics with time, for example, is an interesting one for me, is if we have, say, we score 6 tries, but we had 90% of possession in the game, that could be quite a low return. It's a high possession return, but it's so bringing things like that, taking the original Opta file and deriving statistics from it, is just as important for me as any of the collection that we do. And like you said, then everyone has access to the same base file, but how you use it is probably, and not saying that we're perfect, but we definitely we would try to look at it as best we can in different ways.
Okay, we probably have time for one more example. So do you want to?
I guess the one we spoke about earlier, Rob, was that the misconception around certain aspects of the game that actually matter. Tackling percentage doesn't matter, wins and losses. And what we see on this one is that hopefully those dots can show. But I mean, we can lose a game with a high tackle percentage, but we can win a game with a low tackle percentage. Now, we're never going to win this game if you're both low and poor and everything else. So that was the pre-World Cup game in Twickenham against England. But then you look at other games and you think, well, that Japanese game, 90% tackle completion, still lose the game. Really high against England, 91, and we lose 24-12 in Twickenham. It's very difficult to say that those kind of metrics matter, and that's what I'm talking about. Those kind of derived statistics are going back in and then plotting them against something that you think that does matter. For me, this one is interesting because this is a calculated, I guess it's calculated field, but it's calculated statistic on defense efficiency. So the amount of minutes and minutes you're in defense versus the concession of points in defense. And then at the bottom is the tackle percentage to see. And it just does, it brings you, apart from an outlier like that, which was that England game, it does show a little bit more of a relationship between tackle completion, tackle success, defense efficiency and tackle percent. But at the same time, it opens another line of questioning into, well, what actually does matter? And if it's not first up tackling, what does actually impact that defense efficiency, as opposed to looking at a raw penalties conceded. You can make all your tackles. You conceded something like 9 penalties. They're all kickable. You can't win the game. We know we score over 2. We score 3 tries or more, we will win the game. In the last 30 something games, we scored 3 tries. We won all those games. So it's a little bit like trying to pull those statistics out that mean something a little bit more than what we've already shown, and getting away from the stuff that just pops up on the telly as a random stat that seems to tell you something.
Yeah, it's unlikely that that's actually what you use internally to measure performance. I
think we've gone away from any of that. Nearly all, like even possession and territory stats are very misleading at times, because sometimes you don't want possession and other times you do. So by calling it a positive or negative, yeah, for sure.
Okay, I think we're almost out of time. Another plan is to finish 1:15. So if anyone has any questions, they can fire them away.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. That was very insightful yet again. And I think we learned a lot from it there. I was curious actually about, Vinny, you're using your dad as a soundboard. And I think it's sort of, it was interesting from the point of view of, and I wonder, does this pertain to all of your team in the of analysts? The notion of knowing your audience and who you're delivering to, and not, I suppose, using analyst speak so much when you're delivering to the stakeholders. And how important is that? And is it actually part of the training that you deliver to your analysts?
To say it's part of the training I'd like to say it is. I guess it's probably not. I think one of the biggest things for me is that all of the analysts that work in that environment at the moment, we're in the office together and regularly would ask each other to check each other's work, and put something in front of you and go, does that make sense? And it's that, being a little bit being able to be a bit vulnerable too with what you've maybe spent 3 or 4 or 5 hours putting together, and then putting it in front of somebody and accepting that they could go, I don't actually get that. Yeah. I don't really, or what's that? I don't understand fully what that is. And not to take that too personally. So yeah, I think that's something that I've enjoyed doing. And I guess the other guys that we have in the office are keen on it too, to say, right, what does that look like? Yeah.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, that's great. I think it's an important part of it. There's one coming here now. It's in the chat here. John Green. Does Vinny and team look at the other independent analysis that is done lately to see if they have any insights that the IRFU hasn't come up with?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that, we would be serial kind of blog scanners and readers across all, that's what I think it's nearly part of our job, is to stay on top of something, that if there's academic literature published, that we at least stay on top of what that might look like. If there's reports come out of the Rugby World Cup from any other countries, yeah, we definitely want to tune in and read them. Some stuff in the media has been really good. You read something online and you go, wow, that's a really insightful piece. There's no way that we could ever accept that we would know everything about our team and every other team.
Sure.
Just by the nature of, you've one brain and you've got thousands of other brains looking at the same thing, you're going to get some insight. So yeah.
I'm curious to know actually if Tom is still there. There's another question come in, but if Tom is still there.
Tom has actually asked a question there. Yeah, he can ask it himself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so sorry, I'll just say, my question was obviously your work's predominantly looking at the international side, but when you're looking for potential new players to join the international side, do you track them, and is that using obviously the Opta data as well?
That's the biggest shift we've had in the last 3 years, Tom, is that we've because we're now coding everything ourselves in our own system, we can start to look at a lot better. We can look at where our players sit relative to the rest of the internationals in the core, the rest of the players in the country. I'll try to throw something up here that I've had. I'll just take some of the names out of this one, but let me just see. If you can see on this one, that would be each one of those is a metric, and the tiny yellow dot is where that player sits relative to the other players in that section.
Yep.
filter by minutes played, so you get rid of some of the obvious stuff, and then look at the collision winnings tackle per 80 minutes. But you also have to question the opposition that's available. So that would be a player playing in you can see it in the A League. So I guess same as what you guys call a reserves, and if they're playing in that reserves, where are they sitting out, and then filter that out. Well, what are they like when they play up a level, and where do they sit relative to the rest of that group of players that they're in the same kind of in the same field as. So if it's a back three player, and you can see obviously there's a whole lot of guys at 100%. This is a three game investigation into these players. But yeah, over time, definitely that's really important for me is to be able to track our own guys, and that's what Johnny does, creating or collecting our own data sets now.
Katie, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah. Actually, we had a question there come in from Ida O'Keefe. She's asking, how much do you do live during a game?
Thankfully, we have most of the live data collection is done externally. We just pipe it into the coaches box, and we have it all there. And we try to bring that. I'm trying to make that coaches box less like an Apple store, and just make it as clean as possible. That because a head coach is sitting in that box. I know in football he can be removed. You can have one group of coaches go up in the stand, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, and then the managers on the touchline. If we're all condensed and we have so much stuff coming in, there's only a certain amount of information that anyone can take in, and we don't want to clutter that space. We want really clean communication. We want really nice, lines of communication, and because it's an incredibly pressurized environment. So cleaning everything out that we have was a starting point, but then the information that's coming in is now filtered. In fairness, it's filtered well, because when it gets to the screen, it only comes to one screen now, as opposed to goes to 5 screens, and it's based on questioning. So like if a coach says what's a possession, I can give them that question or that answer, but they're not looking down like they're driving a car with a dashboard in front of them anymore. They're looking at really 3 or 4 things that they've decided before a game.
Tom, I'm curious. Sorry, Katie. Tom, I'm curious to know. And again, if it's private information, you don't have to answer it. Obviously, do you do as much analysis on the referees in football as they do? I mean, in rugby, there's such a huge part of the game, nearly too much a part of the game, some would argue. But do you do as much analysis in football?
We do a small piece of work, not as in depth as Vinny went into there. So we just look at sort of fouls relative to the rest of the referees in the league, yellow cards relative to the rest of the referees. But I thought that was really good, that referee stuff, especially with the different areas in rugby where a referee can obviously award a foul. Really interesting to see where they differ. Yeah,
it plays such a huge part. I mean, because I just wonder, like with some referees, are there more referees who are likely to give a yellow card for, stupid back chat, for example, and you've got a player who's into the back chat a lot, and you've got to say, look, this referee, that kind of analysis. It's those small margins, and I just wondered, did you look at it as much?
What I really liked as well was like the battle of the referee, like Vinny that you spoke about, where it was like you might have given away 20, but if the opposition have given away 25, then you've won that battle. So it was really nice, that piece. Yeah.
Interesting. There's another question in, and we at this stage, because it's 1:20, we're doing great, and again, really appreciate your time, guys. This is in from Tony Kennedy. I assume it's for Vinny. Do you integrate any data from wearables? It's for both of you, I'd say. Apple Watch and sleep data, for example.
It's probably a new. Well, there's not a whole other department. There's the athletic performance department in any of these, and I'm sure it's the same in football. Is the GPS data that they collect is constantly being streamed and being streamed into us. But I guess the challenge at the moment that we're undergoing is trying to get rid of as many metrics as we can from that data, and to leave us with what we really need. And it's probably a constant process of refining the type of game that you're trying to play versus the type of metrics that you need players to be able to hit. If you come in with a new coach, you might be trying to play a completely different game. You might need players to have a different skill set. But the Apple Watch connects into the StatSport software that we would use, so players in rehab I think it's important to empower players a little bit to take a bit of ownership of their own data, and because they're constantly on about their ownership of data, that they take ownership of also understanding what they're collecting on themselves and having a look at their stat sports data and actually understanding what that is. Gives them, and a lot of guys are wearing their own wearables. Now, if you look through any of the pictures and training recently, I would say there's about 30% of them have something on their wrist that isn't an IRFU or a product that's something that they're collecting on themselves.
Brilliant stuff. Okay.
Well,
guys.
It's not brilliant because it's a disaster.
The answer was brilliant.
Has that come into football, Tom? Have you got lads turning up with their own stuff?
Not really. They'll all be wearing an iWatch, but they won't be doing, pulling any data from it.
And 2 Rolexes.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, guys, I think if that's all the questions and everything, I think we'll leave it at that. And as I said, I really appreciate your time and thank you very much. It's been insightful, to say the least. And I hope that everybody attended, had something that they can take away from it. Getting lots of stuff coming in here, great stuff, thanks. And I'll deliver them on to you because there's too many. They're all flying in here, to be honest with you. So again, thank you very much. And for those of you who came along, if you want to tell your friends and colleagues about it, there will be a recording of this available either this evening or later on. And as I said, I'll post the link to that, or the video itself, onto our LinkedIn page at the Information Lab Ireland. So
good luck to Tom as well, Johnny. Good luck to Tom tonight. What a big night.
Good luck to Tom. It's such a huge night. And, we will try and harness the spirit of, who was it, Scotland versus Bulgaria, that got us to our first Euro 88. And we will channel that energy over to Swansea, and we will hope for the best for you. Because it'd be good to have the Swans back in the Premiership. It's going to be an interesting Premiership next year with Leeds and everything back in it and stuff. So, listen, guys, without further ado, I think I'll leave it at that, unless anybody has anything else to say, and we'll say good luck and thank you very much to everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
All.
All the best, guys. Take care.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Well done, guys.